guys, before we get too deep into today's video, I wanted to talk to you about today's video sponsor, Factor. So I've been using Factor for years now, and I am just so grateful that it exists in general. It kind of solved all my problems with eating and finding time to eat, because I couldn't find time to cook and deal with the cleanup and deal with the mess, and getting takeout was expensive and it's never really that good quality food. With Factor, I get delicious food that's good quality, that makes me feel good, not feel bad. It's ready quickly, and I don't have to do any cleanup. So there's no prep work, there's no cleanup, and it's ready fast. I mean, really, it checks all of the boxes. So Factor is a meal service that delivers fresh, never frozen meals right to your door that are ready in 2 minutes. I can't think of anything more convenient than that, you know? And that's been huge for me because I'm busy and I don't have a lot of time, and I'm always rushing around, and trying to find the time to eat is tough. And another thing they have that really helps with that is they have snack options like smoothies. They have these wellness shots that I really love because it's just a quick shot, it's easy, it's simple, and it's effective. And I'm able to just move on about my day and not have to keep track of a drink or things like that. So they've got me covered in kind of the midday slump when I get a little bit hungry, and then they've got me covered for dinner when I'm ready to eat. And I don't have to, I can spend an extra 30 minutes to an hour working out here in the shop, because that's time I don't have to spend preparing my food, and I still get a delicious, warm meal. So I can't say enough good things about it. It's been amazing. It's been a game changer for me, and I'm absolutely in love with it. And I think you will be too if you give it a shot. So if you're interested in giving it a shot, head to factor75.com and use code TaylorJust50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. It's a great way to try it out. Just firsthand, see what you think, and then go from there. If you're like me, you're gonna fall in love with it and wish you had done it sooner. But you gotta try it first. So, factor75.com, code TaylorJust50. Check it out, see what you think. So, that being said, we have a lot of work to do. I do wanna say a huge thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video, but it's time to get back to it. All right, well, today is the day we are starting on the super light, no prep drag race first Gen RX7 project. We got to come up with a shorter name for this thing. But that being said, it's time to finally dive into this project. I'm very excited about this. I've wanted to build a car like this for years, and we're finally doing it. The first step really before we can start moving forward is to go a bit backwards. There's a lot of stuff in this car, like this old wiring and things like that we need to take out, and there's a lot of things we're just kind of unsure on. Not to mention, it is incredibly dirty. I'm not sure what this is that is over every single one of these panels and tubes, but it can't be good, and it doesn't look good. So the first step is going to be to take everything off of this car that will come off of it, get everything cleaned up and fresh, give ourselves a nice base to start with, and go through and kind of inspect all the tube work, all of the welds, all of that stuff to see if we have any more problem areas that we need to address while we're making some other changes with the tube work in this car. So that's really step one. Basically, strip it down to a bare tub, get a good idea of what we're working with so we know what we kind of need to do moving forward. Now, that being said, one thing I do want to do before we start taking parts and pieces off this thing is I want to mock up some ideas for power adders in the engine bay here. We've got a few different directions that we can go with this. So luckily I have some stuff here that I can mock up to get an idea, do some measurements, and see if my plan works. Sometimes you'll have an idea in your head of how things are going to go, and once you actually put them there, it doesn't really work out like you hoped. So I want to do that, but before we do any of that, I do have one little side project that I've been meaning to tackle for a while now. So I got this 3/8 inch thick plate, aluminum plate. So this car is going to have a metric ton of fab work on it. But that's what I'm most excited about. That's what I love doing the most when it comes to building the car. So my goal is to make sure that we have all the necessary tools that we're going to need to do all of the fabrication work on this car before we get started, so that we don't get caught out with any surprises. So one of the most invaluable tools that I have made for doing fabrication stuff is this little machinist vise here. So I added these soft jaws so that I can clamp any sort of tubing in here and do my welding. So that way I can hold it in place, hold it at a certain point of the rotation, weld, rotate, so on and so forth. However, there has always been a problem with this, and it's that I only had this 1/8 inch thick aluminum plate when I did this, and it works okay, but if you're clamping up here, it's just too soft, too malleable. It just bends and it doesn't really hold what you're trying to hold in place, and that creates some challenges. So what we're going to do is replace these soft jaws with some 3/8 inch thick aluminum soft jaws. That should give us better heat dissipation, and it should be a lot stiffer and hold our stuff in place. So a little out of left field, but I just really want to do this and see the result. I've been wanting to do this forever. I got the piece. So that being said, I'm gonna quit jibber jabbering and I'm gonna get to work. So once we had the first piece cut, we checked out our cut lines just to make sure we had a decent finish on there, and then went ahead and marked out the second piece to get it cut. This stuff is really, really thick, so even though it's aluminum and it's soft, it takes a little bit to cut through it, but it makes it a little easier to be accurate with your cut. So we've got our two giant 4x4 squares. It's time to make sure that they are indeed the right shape and get our holes lined up so that we can drill and tap them. Now, this is a really important part. We got to make sure that we are super accurate here. So I clamped them in the vise perfectly lined up and then used a transfer punch to tap and mark our holes so that they are exactly where they need to be. So something that's really important when you're drilling holes in general, but especially when you're drilling holes through something thick, but more especially when you're going to be tapping those holes, is that you make sure you drill them square. When you're going through something like this, it's pretty easy to drill through at an angle. So I had to keep checking myself and making sure that I had the drill square up and down and left and right, and got our holes drilled and tapped. Everything fit good so we could go ahead and do the second one. When it's something like this, I like to do them one at a time just to make sure that my kind of plan worked out. So we drilled the holes, chamfered them a little bit, came back with the tap and some tap magic, and these things tapped like butter. Almost a concerningly soft, but once we had the holes in them and we bolted them in and everything lined up, then we could go to work, put some time in on the belt grinder, get all of the edges cleaned up and roughed off this thing so it doesn't have any sharp corners for us to snag our hands on or for our pieces to snag on and get scratched up. The idea of these is to be soft jaws that don't really damage what you're working on with them in the soft jaws. Alright, well, we got our vise all finished up. I'm really happy with it. Let's test it out, actually, real quick. See how much deflection we get. This is a good example. Let's say I needed to weld these D-bands. Oh, that's solid. Yeah. Before, when you would do this, it would just stay loose. But that's solid. I did make a slight miscalculation here. And I did my measurements based off these being 1/4 inch, and then at the last minute, I decided to step them up to 3/8 of an inch to minimize deflection, and it's about an 1/8 inch shy of having a 4-inch total opening, which we need because we work a lot with 4-inch for building exhaust stuff on turbo cars. So I may have to get another one or change these or whatever. But this will work for a lot of the stuff that we do. It's just 4-inch. It might not fit all the way down in there. We'll see if that's a problem or not. It might still work okay. I don't know. I wish I had a piece of 4-inch lying around to test it, but I do not. So, moving on to the car. Except I do have one more quick little side project to tackle. So when we take this thing apart, we need somewhere to put all the pieces and organize them, which this table is the perfect place for that. However, I've been wanting to do an upgrade to this thing for a while. The biggest downfall of this table is the casters. I put a lot of time into building it, made it super structurally sound. It's very sturdy. I'm confident I could set my Miata on it. Maybe I'll try one day, but not with these casters. These are off an old toolbox that I put in my old trailer, and they're dinky, they're plastic, they're junk. So I've got some slightly larger, slightly beefier caster wheels to go on this thing. Plus these all pivot. That's another annoying thing is the back wheels don't pivot. those do. So when you're trying to move it around in tight spaces, it gets tricky. So I want to get these swapped on, but obviously I can't flip the table over to do it if there's a bunch of stuff on the table, so we got to do it first. But I promise, after this last little shop organization project, we'll get to work on tearing this thing apart. I promise. I promise. Alright, maybe I'm not going to flip the table. Let me try and jack the table up. See if I can do it that way. That'll work. Alright, I'm going to try to flip the table still. I'm going to take all the wheels off and then try to flip it, maybe. Or at least take this side off. I don't know. So when you're doing a project like this and you're working by yourself, sometimes you've got to get a little creative. So I'm trying to put a jack under here to give the table enough tilt before the wheels hit the ground, but it's not working. So I'm trying to chalk the wheel on the jack. It's not working. So then I switched to throwing some wood blocks under there, and it's looking promising. Oh, that was not easy. Oh, it rolls so nice now. Had to get creative there. That was rough. Oh, I got it flipped. It's a little tall now, a little off-roady, but it'll work. I need to actually spin it around. It's been facing the wrong way for a while now. Now it's easy. Spin it on around. Oh, yeah. Oh, that rolls nice. Alright, well, now that I've converted my table into a four-wheel drive off-road trail machine, I gotta admit, this thing it's a bit higher than I anticipated. Practically speaking, it might be a touch too tall now. So if anything, we can change them out to some smaller ones and just use those on something else. I don't know. But for now, at least this thing will roll a little bit better. But we've got it ready. We can tear the car apart and have a nice place to put things. It's time to do some engine bay mock-up and see if any of our power plant, power outer options are gonna work or if we're out of our minds. Because it's kind of tough to tell until you start putting stuff in an engine bay how much room you really have to work with. Let's see if my first idea of a setup will work here. So I have these turbos that I got I got them for the vet originally, and this is one of those ideas that I thought was gonna work that didn't. I was gonna tuck them up by the firewall, run the downpipes, through the transmission tunnel, but there just wasn't room to get a downpipe through there. I really loved the idea of this. It was gonna be cool, but it wouldn't work. So these are gonna be a good mock-up test to see if something similar is gonna work on this car. So we're not gonna use these exact turbos. Actually gonna be a bit larger, but the rough size should give us an idea if this is gonna work or not. These are some VS Racing, I think they're 63 mil, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so it's pretty cool that VS Racing offers these because these are mirror image turbos with V-band inlets, which is pretty neat. I'm a big fan of running a V-band inlet. They should give us an idea of if my clocking will work. So the idea would be twins tucked back by the firewall, run the intercooler piping nice and low to keep it from being ugly, and then downpipe out the fender here basically. Really would actually make more sense for this one to be over there, but I need to measure because I do not remember what size these turbos were. It might be 67. Maybe 67, 65. It's been so long. I do like the look of these. They're nice and small. We might not need that much power. All right, well, those look so good in there that I'm kind of reformulating my game plan to see if I can make these work. I think they're gonna be a little small, but they just fit so good in this area. This is really where I'd like to mount the turbos, and you can probably guess that turbo on each side means a V8. Now, I know that's unfortunate. It's not an LS. We did consider going JZ. We were really on board with the JZ idea. Raldo and Josue especially were really pushing for it. So we crunched some numbers, we did the math, and we were gonna do basically a compound turbo JZ because that gives me the satisfaction, the joy of building a really elaborate, complicated turbo setup, and would give us the transient response we need if we have to pedal it, if we're on a bad surface and we start to spin the tire and it not take forever to light the turbo back up. So it was a cool idea. There's a couple of problems though. JZ is really, really long. So doing the measurements, it was gonna be really tough to get it low enough for it to stay under the hood. This car has a pretty aggressive slope to the hood, and my goal is always to keep everything under the hood. It's way more challenging that way, but I think it's way cooler when you have a finished product, and from the outside, you can't tell what's in there because there's nothing sticking out the hood. So that's always my goal, and it was gonna be tough, but more than that, just practically didn't make sense. You know, compared to the V8 option, it was going to cost more to do a JZ. It was going to be heavier because it's an iron block. It doesn't fit as well, and it wouldn't make as much power, and it would be more strung out, you know, require more regular, basically rebuilds, refreshes at even a lower power number than the V8 option. So just, all in all, it just didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense to do it. So I decided to stick with the V8 option. You know, one of the big things here is we're learning a new motorsport, and on the chassis side of things, we have so much to learn. I don't want to completely try to learn some really foreign engine setup and fight an uphill battle. So going with something I'm a little bit familiar with, a V8, I think is the best option for now, but we're still in the trial and error phase. That's why I'm doing this. So I'm gonna drop the vet down, take some measurements off its engine, and just to get a rough idea of size, because it's hard to tell. This is a small car. That is one of the downsides, but the upside of it being a small car is it's a very light car, which means we need less power to go really fast. So positive pros and cons. Anyway. All right, well, after doing some measuring, definitely really glad I did this. And that's why it's important to do this kind of mock-up in the early stages of a build, because there's a lot that's kind of dependent on what direction you go. And I had a plan to do kind of this with larger turbos and all of this stuff, and I don't think it's gonna work. I don't think there's gonna be enough room for the turbos to be here and be larger. But that opens up the possibility to go some different directions. We can go a different direction with where the turbos are to fit larger turbos. We can go a different direction with the engine platform and use these turbos. It's kind of flipped my master plan on its head, and I'm actually excited about that, because I think my new plan is a better way for us to get going and kind of start working out the bugs and learning what the chassis likes, where the weight needs to be, all of those things. So I'm full steam ahead down path number 3 or 4. More on that later. That said, I've done about all the measuring and looking and planning and plotting that I can do with these turbos here, so I can get them out of the way and we can finally start tearing this car apart. So you know the deal. Enough jibber jabber for real this time. That was a lot of jibber jabber. That's part of it though. It's part, you know, I'm showing you my thought process. You know, there's a lot that goes into this. All right, enough jibber jabber. Let's get to work. The doors. The downside of working on a lift. The one nice thing about building the vet in the garage. Oh, I think I need to. There we go. Got it. Deal with lift arms in the way. nice for getting in and out of this thing on the trailer and working on it, really, especially when it's on the lift. I'd say we should do that in drifting, but pretty sure it's illegal on FD. So it's a bit lighter. This will make a great place for some remote coil packs. So much room for activities in here. Look at all that. Definitely coil packs. Maybe, I feel like there's something else we need to put somewhere that we could put in here. Either way, that's nice. I'm into that. It does have fire suppression lines. I probably strip those out. Don't want to be trusting my wife to a fire suppression. Somebody else did. It's kind of crazy to reach up into the car and grab the camera. You can see kind of what we're working with now as far as tube structure is concerned. So far, everything's looking pretty good. These are nice. We do need to switch these out to kind of the retaining spring style that stay with the panel. They're just easier to deal with, and they don't come loose as easily. But we're getting somewhere. I'm pulling the rest of this wiring out, and then we gotta pull this mid plate off. This is why I like using big zip ties. In this case, they're necessary, but they are also reusable. You can easily get in there and hit the latch because the mechanism's so big. So this is why I love using Deutsch connectors, because depinning a connector is never a good time. Doesn't matter what connector it is, but these connectors are way easier to depin. You can get in here and you've got these giant tabs to unlock the pins, whereas with a lot of like OEM connectors, there is no room. You got to get in there with a very specific depinning tool. It's a total pain. I could just cut this connector because I'm not going to reuse it, but just in case. So once I had the connector off, I could start feeding the wiring back through. You learn a lot about a car when you take it apart. So, you know, just glancing in here, I wasn't sure how much wiring was here and what was going on with it, but there's actually a good amount of wiring that was in this car when we weighed it, which is kind of good news for us because we're going to be using mil-spec wiring, which is a lot lighter. So even with a little bit more wiring, we should end up at a similar, we shouldn't be adding any weight with wires, which is awesome. So I got those out, went ahead and pulled this old dated switch panel out, and then we could pull almost the final piece of the puzzle out, the mid plate. So much room for activities. Can literally just climb in here if I wanted to. All right, well, we've got almost everything off that we want to take off before we start spraying this thing down with the pressure washer to try to clean the bulk of the chassis. We do have one more thing I'd like to take off, and that's this gauge cluster here. However, I can't get to that one with a regular screwdriver, and we kind of need a tool for this anyway for the future, so I'm gonna go ahead and make a little tool. So we can get in there, get to these, take these off, take that off, and then we'll push this thing outside and get to the satisfying part of pressure washing all of this off. Get to see what this thing looks like, not covered in whatever this is. Definitely a job for the scrap bin. There's a problem when your scrap bin gets so full that you don't want to try to dig into it because it's too much. I think that'll work. I'm envisioning it in my head. I think those pieces will work. Hot. See if it works. Oh, it's gonna be tight. All right, well, the tool worked, and we've got the final piece out of here. One, so we can access some of this wiring that I still need to take out. But two, just getting everything out that will come off so we can clean it separately. But this is what it's looking like in here. Well, we'll get this thing down on the dollies, push it outside. Hopefully my hose reaches, and we'll start pressure washing. All right, well, we're ready to go. It's that's a little before and after. All of this junk should hopefully be gone here soon. Those aren't painted gray. That's dirt. Same with back here. That's carbon, not dirt. Oh, this is gonna be satisfying. Let's get to it. Dude, I didn't expect it to come off that easy. So the tricky thing about washing any race car is it's not very sealed up. So while you're washing the outside, you're also washing the inside. In this scenario, that's kind of what we're going for, but it's still tricky to make sure we don't get a bunch of water in places where it's going to sit and collect. We're going to have to clean it out after if we do. So we got to be careful and really kind of methodical here to get this thing cleaned up without making a further mess down the road. So I'm not one of those detail guys that's cleaning his car with a toothpick every other week, but I do really enjoy cleaning things when there's a big transformation, when you can see the satisfying results as you go of something getting dramatically cleaner. And this was one of those times. This whole car, but especially these panels, woo, they cleaned up nice. I mean, it's most of what was gross on this car and dirty was literally just a quick layer of grime that came off with the first blast of the pressure washer. So it felt good. I did have to go back in some of the cavities that didn't drain on their own with the vacuum and make sure we didn't leave any standing water in this thing. Alright, well, that was about as satisfying as I expected. Look at this thing all cleaned up. I had no idea that some glossy paint was hiding under there and some nice fresh carbon. This thing was just covered in a layer of grime. And I mean, even, the lower control arms, they looked like they were all corroded, but they were just dirty. So pretty satisfying. If you look at the inside, you can see all the tube work is the same color now, which will be a lot easier to inspect all the welds to make sure everything's good and complete and all of that jazz. I do still need to do some work cleaning the dash. There's some spaces in here that I've got to get in here by hand and wipe down, but for the most part, as a whole, it's clean. It's going to get dirty when I put my greasy mitts on it while I'm building it, but at least for now, I'm not getting a layer of dust on my hand every time I touch the thing, and we can kind of see the potential of what this thing's going to look like when it's all said and done, which is always nice and motivating. So I'm real satisfied with that. That was a very, very rewarding project there. So we've got everything taken off for the most part. We've got our steering wheel and our mid plate over here. Got those. I do need to clean up the steering wheel. I want to try to salvage this. It's in pretty good condition. It's got the button already. I like this. I feel like it fits kind of the theme of the build. So that being said, the next step was going to be to take all the suspension off, inspect all the Heim joints, do all of that. However, I need this thing to be mobile because we got other projects to work on. So I don't want to take off the wheels and then not be able to move it around. Not to mention, we are kind of at capacity here. I don't really have anywhere to put things until I get the loft done. So I don't want to put more parts in the way. So I'm going to leave the suspension on for now. We've got parts on order. We've got the engine sorted out. We've got the turbo sorted out. I still need to find a transmission. We've got parts on order in multiple different directions, but it's one of those things you don't really know what you need till you get the project, get it in your hands, and start looking at it, and that's kind of where we're at. We've got a good plan, just need some parts to arrive. So in the meantime, we're going to jump back on our entry-level drag racing with the turbo truck and upgrade the fuel system so we can run E85 on it, and then next will be the turbo, and this thing is going to snowball a bit, but I'm here for it. So that being said, we are out of time for this one. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here, but I do want to say a huge thank you for watching, for subscribing, for commenting, for the kind words, for everything that you guys do to make this possible. I know it's cliche and I know every YouTuber says it, but I'm still going to say it anyway. Thank you. I really appreciate you all. So I hope to see you next time and the time after that, but for now, that's it. Goodbye.